Hello, good evening. It's good to see you here on Ghana Tonight. I'm Kamini Amano. Let's take a look at our top stories right now. Minority in Parliament will not have military boots on the ground at our land borders, not for grain exportation ban enforcement or any other reason heading into the election. Tonight, they say they have seen it all before. Also tonight, there are calls to strengthen security inland and online as stakeholders point to foreign interference and high probability of electoral violence in 59 constituencies. Question, are you safe? Plus, ECG under fire for poor services, including overbilling and frequent power outages. Those are the big stories we are following tonight. Be sure to be part of the conversation. We're streaming online at 3news.com and on Facebook as well as YouTube. But if you'd like to comment, share your thought or ask a question, use the hashtag Ghana Tonight. It's easier to find you that way. Let's bring you a quick summary of Friday's top stories on Ghana Brief.
The Electricity Company of Ghana has come under intense backlash over what most postpaid customers frown upon as overbilling and unlawful meter disconnections. Some customers have had to deal with power cuts in the pursuit of seeking redress.
The nature of the overbilling we are experiencing appears to be an electronic problem with ECG itself and not per se a mathematical error. That their system more or less is exaggerating the consumption rate of consumers.
Farmers in the northern region affected by the dry spell are raising transparent concerns regarding disbursement of relief intervention of some 500 million cedis announced by government to deal with the impact of the dry spell in northern Ghana. Government earlier this week announced that it will cost the government some 500 million cedis to mitigate the potential food crisis caused by the dry spell.
Ever since I've gotten into myself into farming as a commercial farmer, I've never seen this kind of thing. This year, you can look around and see our farm. This 50 acres maize farm, that has nothing, yielded nothing.
Many residents and motorists in Sekendi Takrady are raising concerns about safety risk due to non-functioning streetlights. The city authorities who blame it on cable thefts say they are turning to solar-powered streetlights on major streets to address the challenge.
What we are going to do this time is we're going to install solar light instead of using cables, because the cables are stolen every time we do the installation.
Small-scale gold miners in Ghana have for many years been using mercury to extract the precious mineral. Though a toxic chemical, the miners say the inaccessibility of mercury-free technology in the country has compelled them to continue using it, exposing them to its associated health implications.
In certain areas where mercury exposure is at the highest level, studies have shown that some mothers give birth to babies with some defect. Again, it also has effects on reproductive systems, also has effects on the cardiovascular systems, the kidney, liver, and stuff.
Ghana's future depends on leaders who serve, not self-serve. That's according to renowned lawyer Chatuchi Kata. In the wake of current economic challenges, he argues that the nation needs selfless leaders who will prioritize national rebuilding over personal aggrandizement. He made these remarks at the 14th CSG lecture.
Irrespective of party colors, we do not need leaders who see themselves as entitled, who consider national resources as an inheritance left for them by their forefathers. Literally, it is leaders who identify with the ordinary person, who have faith in the people, who will harness the power of the people and the God-given resources of our land to rebuild the nation.
Gonna brief there for you. Now, to enforce ban on food security or decoy to rig elections, tonight the minority in Parliament makes a revealing recollection. It's 99 days to the 2024 election. This is your Election Command Center, and tonight we'll begin our coverage from Parliament, where the minority is kicking against use of military at Ghana's land borders. Defense Minister Dominic Nitiwul explained at a news conference earlier this week that the soldiers will enforce a ban on grain exportation. This is aimed at combating the threat of food insecurity brought on by the drought in the north. But according to the NDC MPs, the latest move by the government is a decoy. They say it is a game plan they have seen all before. Well, now, we're going to hear from James Agalga, who is ranking on for the NDC's security issues in Parliament. We'll hear from him as he tells us why they think they have seen this all before.
The minority takes note of the rollout of measures by the government to address the potentially devastating impact of the dry spell on food security in our country, the deployment of the military to our borders to ostensibly perform the task of the enforcement of a ban on the exportation of grain raises several questions and suspicions. Neither the Minister for Food and Agriculture nor the Minister for Defense, who announced the ban and deployment of the military, adduced any evidence to establish the inability of our immigration and customs services to enforce the prohibition in question. The minority recalls that in the run-up to the 2020 presidential and parliamentary elections, the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia government heavily deployed the country's military, particularly in the Volta and Oti regions, as part of a carefully orchestrated strategy that scared eligible voters from exercising their franchise. The pretext for the massive deployment was the alleged secessionist threat posed by what has now been established as phantom groups. Interestingly, once the elections were over, the secessionist threat suddenly evaporated. The Minister for Agriculture, Honorable Brian Achampon, who made the border closure announcement, is the very person who has declared time and again to do everything to wreck the chances of the NDC to win the December 7th, 2024 elections. This whole idea behind the deployment of the military is meant to intimidate and harass eligible Ghanaian voters.
We can now bring in security analyst Dr. Adam Bona, who's joining us via Zoom. Doc, good evening to you. Thanks for staying up for us. But listen, I want to take it from where James Agalga stops, where he makes the connection between Brian Achampon as National Security Minister and, him as a Greek minister, and the fact that it would appear they're playing out the same script 4 years on. Is there a genuine and germane concern there, or is it just coincidence?
Oh, yes, good evening. I think that there is a genuine concern there if you ask me. And the reason is that, the periods, before 2020 elections, we had this heightened, we had some heightened security situations where we spoke about all these secessionist groups, and we had heavy military deployment in some, areas in the Volta region. And even though some of us spoke about it, it looks like the deployment was sustained. And afterwards, we haven't really heard about the secessionist groups, but I am reliably informed we still have military deployment around the area. And so for this particular deployment that is being discussed, that has to do with, stopping grains being exported. This should be the work of internal security. Some of us have advocated over the periods that the military should be left out of the work of internal security. And so once the military is brought in, especially when we have largely about 3 months to go into elections, then these issues would come up. And so I would have wished that this is left solely within the remit of the Ghana Police Service, the Ghana Immigration Service, the Ghana Customs, the customs people to deal with. And they are adequate enough. They have the capacity to deal with this. But then bringing in the military, already we don't even have any grains at all. We don't have grains to eat. And so once we don't have grains to eat and we are going to be importing grains, then it begs the question, why are we doing a deployment such as these? So obviously, Kemeni, I believe that these are questions that we should be asking. These are questions that citizens should, especially looking at all the things that have been said within this period as we prepare for 2024 elections.
I see. I mean, when you listen to the government's position on this much, it would appear that the military will be coming in to augment, the other security personnel at the land borders. But for some, this is an indictment on, say, the Ghana Immigration Service because they are unable to protect our land borders. Would you say same?
Well, you see, when it comes to the politics of our country, these matters would make a revered institution look very inefficient and incapable. But these are political decisions. The immigration officials have not complained that they don't have the capacity. The Ghana Police Service, they have not complained that they don't have the capacity. Neither have we heard from those in charge of taxes, customs, that they don't have the capacity. And all of these people, we have them around the borders. And so then the question that would arise is, why are we deploying the military? And so we are aware that we have, issues to do with extremists, across the border. And we already have some deployment. But this beefed up deployment, or this deployment that we are discussing at the moment, looks like something that is supposed to check, smuggling of grains out of this country when we don't actually have grains. And so then where do we go from here? I think that it needs to be looked at pretty well, because then it does not make the military look very, the way we should look at them in the eyes of the populace. We would want our military to stand their grounds if ever Ghana comes under any form of attack. But when the people begin to feel that the military itself is compromised, then we have issues. And so I think that without gauging why the defense minister or the security apparatus will do this, and these are things that I've discussed in the past, that the military should be left out of all internal security arrangements, including this one. They should be left out of all, internal security arrangements, including the upcoming elections and this deployment. For me, I think that the internal security officers can do this and do it better than the military.
Very well.
Because the military are not trained. They are not trained to stop smuggling. It's not their work. They are not trained. They don't have, the military rather lacks the technical know-how to do this type of deployment. How are they going to spot someone who is smuggling, grains from someone who is smuggling, let's say, other things? But there are people who have been doing this for years. Why not let them do it?
Indeed. Doc, what are we up against if the government, follows through with this, move, this intention, this decision?
Well, heightened tension, 3 months into elections, every security movement, 3 months into elections, every tampering or every movement of the way we understand the conventions when it comes to security movement. At the moment you go beyond that, it's going to heighten tension. It's going to make people psych themselves to be prepared. And I don't think we want such a thing. And so as far as I'm concerned, we don't want citizens' mobilization against our revered military institution or against any security agency in this country. And so I would want that my brother, the Interior Minister, the Defense Minister, and his colleagues at National Security, the President, who is the Commander-in-Chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, the Agric Minister. I don't think there is a need to deploy the military, if you ask me, at all. It's needless because the military lacks. They don't have any technical know-how when it comes to smuggling. You don't take military officers to train them to spot someone who is smuggling things. But you train immigration officers, you train customs, and somehow police and the rest. At the moment you deploy the military, questions will come up. So I think that it's important that our this deployment, probably they stand it down and have everything and allow immigration, police, and customs to do that work, so that this heightened tension, we can bring it down a bit. At the moment, it's not looking good for all of us in the country.
Indeed. Dr. Adam Bona, security analyst, thank you so much for talking to us. We'll stay on this subject for a tad, because daughter of Ghana's first president and former MP for Jomoro, Samia Nkrumah, has been reacting to government's intervention to mitigate the impact of the dry spell in parts of the country. She spoke to Beatrice Sidu.
I want to be perfectly honest that I haven't had time to analyze all the facts, but I will tell you where I stand in principle. Now, to the best of my understanding from my initial reading of the situation is that we are doing that because there's a drought and there's a fear that if we export our grain,
we may not have enough.
We may not have enough. So for me, this is a simple thing to understand. Because first and foremost, a nation must feed itself. Because if you don't feed yourself, then I don't know, it is crazy. Then we are in a bad situation. So if this is the objective, then even though it might not be a very a perfect solution, but it is one way of protecting us from famine and hunger.
But the farmers disagree with it. They think that the government is just imposing something on them and it would also affect them financially. Others think it's a way of
Unfortunately, it might affect them financially, but this is where a responsive government approach has to come in. So they need to be engaged. They need to even perhaps we have to find a way of compensating them if they were getting some revenue from their exports. But the principle of keeping enough inside our country to avoid hunger is not a bad one. But you are right, there need to be perhaps other measures to make sure that people, because these people are not rich people, they are not rich, so we have to make sure that they are cushioned from these measures.
The government is looking for 500 million cedis to
cushion them.
To, yes, implement a number of measures. The farmers again are afraid that it could go to politically inclined individuals. What do you make of it? How would you expect the government to?
That would be tragic, of course. I wouldn't agree with it. But I pray and I hope, and I want all of us to help with that, is that the farmers need to be cushioned from this drastic measure, which perhaps it is necessary to avoid hunger inside Ghana, but you always have to balance things. So if you are going to take this measure, so yes, by all means, we need to cushion.
Tonight's electoral safety sits high on our menu. We dissect and digest all that matters this minute. A few questions for you. What does foreign interference in our elections look like? Why and who could be behind them? The phenomenon is not new, but has reached alarming levels. And tonight, the National Media Commission is warning about foreign information manipulation and interference called FEMA. The deliberate effort by both state and non-state actors to distort information. Executive Secretary of the NMC, George Sapon, predicts FEMA will play out heavily in the lead up to the 2024 elections.
The reason why it is different from disinformation is that when we deal with FEMA is based on truthful information, but manipulated out of context. It is playing out and it is going to play out strongly in this election. These ones are sponsored by big nations with big money behind them. And their purpose essentially is to bring down the centers of social stability in a democracy. Just three key strategies: gaslighting intellectuals, weaponizing ego explosion, and exploiting nationalism. They target the institutions of stability: National Peace Council, Electoral Commission, NCCE, the church leaders, the traditional leaders. The idea is to undermine their influence. It is critical material that people are putting out on these people that they use algorithms to promote. So material that can create conflict, material that can undermine the institutions that deal with the conflict, is what they help to go viral, and then try to limit responses to them. What they are doing is that because people are sending out this message, when they push the message up, those who are sending the messages believe very strongly that they are saying something wise. That is why it is going viral. Sometimes there are people behind this, not from this country, who are helping you to destroy your nation. But you feel satisfied that you put something out and it is going viral.
Sounds alarming, doesn't it? But there's more than just one threat we face in the lead up to the 2024 election. The West African Network for Peace Building, WANEP, after assessing and mapping out hotspots for electoral violence across all constituencies in the country, they are convinced 59 of them could be at a significant risk for electoral unrest. Very well. I wanted you to hear from Dr. Vincent Azuma, who is head of monitoring and evaluation at WANEP. But how about we do you one better? We'll bring him in live as we have a conversation on our security matters. Thank you so much for joining us here, Dr. Azuma.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, fantastic. I almost thought that the connection dropped on me. But listen, we were going to play that insert where you talk about these 59 constituencies. Let's talk about what you observed in your assessment.
First, let me talk about the phenomenon of assessing constituencies before elections across West Africa. So this is to allow us to understand the conflict situations in these places so that we can then arrange the requisite response mechanisms to avert any escalations. So that is exactly what we did again in May. So this assessment was done in May, and a review, the next assessment will be done again in September to have an update of the situation in this constituency. So in all what we have is the 275 constituencies. We are having about 29 of them being at very high risk. And then 30 of them being at the level of high risk across the 275 constituencies.
I see. What determines the risk value of a particular constituency?
Yes. we have a number of indicators that we use to apportion the risk values. So we look at the environment, the climate in the area, the surrounding, the conflict history, past history of violence in the area. We look at the chieftaincy and land disputes that may be exploited during the elections and used as triggers to cause havoc. We also look at organized crime in the areas. We look at the areas where we have weak security systems that may not be able to contain levels of violence. And we also look at the proximity of likelihood of violent extremists or any other conflict that surrounds the area that this constituency is. And we look at the balance in support for the contestants or the parties in those areas. So these are a few of the things that we look at that we use to calculate.
Well, I'm not sure we still have Dr. Azuma, are you still there? Well, I don't think so, but what we've been talking about is some hotspots that OneApp has mapped out. Doc, you were making a point, finish that point about the how you apportion the risk values, and then we'll move on from there.
Yes, I was talking about, we're looking at the weak security systems in the area, if you can hear me.
Yes.
And we also look at the history of violence in the particular constituency that we assess. And we look at the proximity of the likelihood of violence extremists and other organized criminals in the area. And then we look at the balance in support for the parties in the area. For instance, if you take the MPP and NDC, how is the balance? Is it 50-50? So is there likelihood that the tension is going to be high and people are struggling to win power? So we look at all those parameters to apportion the level of risk.
Right. So, I mean, comparatively, are we seeing higher numbers, lower numbers? Are we swinging at the same level? What's going on?
Well, since this is the first assessment, where we are seeing a rather high level of risks, because if you take as many as 59 areas where we can say at risk at the moment, then it is quite high out of the 275. So, and if you'll be surprised to, it will surprise you to know that a lot of these areas come from the northern, upper east, and the greater Accra region. So these three regions make a greater portion of the high risk and the very high risk areas.
And you say 29 of them are very high risk?
Yes.
Which constituencies
29.
are these?
Okay, we'll be looking at them. If you take Boku, on top of my head, Boku is one of them. We are looking at areas like, just quickly, Saboba, Ablekuma Central, Gushegu, Esunafo South, Techiman South, Karaga, Timpani, Ashaman, Asin North, Yendi, Ofinsu North, Bantama.
I see.
Yes, some of them.
I see. So this information that you have been able to gather from your research, how do you expect authorities, stakeholders, the Electoral Commission, the Ghana Police Service to use it?
Thank you. That's the main reason why we do this. So the reason of doing this is not to cause any panic in the system, but it's to alert all the institutions that you've mentioned and other COSOs and all response structures we have in the country. And they have this information to see that, okay, these are the areas that we may have some violence. So we need to prepare to then avert the violence happening. So it is to prepare the mechanisms that are supposed to be responding to this. So the police service, the churches, our imams, the CSOs that work in peace building, and our election monitoring bodies, and all those people that need this information. So this information is actually shared. And we also have bodies that we have put together as the National Election Response Group, who then analyze this information and then plan how to respond to the information that we put out to avert any escalation of violence in these areas.
I see. But Doc, I mean, this is it's less abstract, right? It's more tangible to deal with. But at the same event where you spoke, the issue of foreign information manipulation interference that came up, which is much less tangible, you know, it gives me source of worry. But I want to ask you, are we already experiencing that in the lead up to the election?
Oh, yes. If we take the registration period and then the observation of like the checking of people's names on the register that happened recently, we actually witnessed or recorded 34 violent incidents, out of which 32 people were injured. So already we've seen signs of some violence and some injuries being recorded. So that is a warning sign. That means that we need to be prepared. We need to actually activate our response mechanisms to ensure that these conflicts, this violence, do not escalate into a full-blown disturbances.
Doc, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much for talking to us. Dr. Vincent Azuma is Head of Monitoring and Evaluation at ONEP. We've been talking about election security. ONEP has identified 59 constituencies with high risk or significant risk of electoral violence in the lead up to the 2024 election. Dr. Azuma tells us that, look, we have seen the tip of the iceberg. We've seen signs of it, and we are worried. And so should other stakeholders be as far as our elections are concerned. I want to move on to some other issues, albeit related to the elections. And my question to you this evening is, how clean is the voter register? We find out tonight amid claims the provisional voter register is rigged. Tonight, the Electoral Commission is fending off claims the voter register is bloated. This is in response to varied allegations from the NDC accusing the EC of underhandedness. NDC's claims have come from across the country. For instance, in the Ejumako Enyan Esim constituency of the Eastern region, the party accuses the EC of being in cahoots with the NPP to rid the register of over 3,000 names. We're going to hear from the constituency chairman of the NDC there as they make the allegation against the Electoral Commission. They say that the EC is conniving with the NPP and have removed some 3,000 names from the register. We'll get more insight from that as we spoke to the NDC chairman of the of the constituency in that central region. But while we work on that, I want to bring in also the NDC in the Upper West region. Over there, again, allegations are made against the Electoral Commission. They say that some transfers that have been made over there are names of people who do not reside in the constituency, and they count up to 200 names.
EC to expunge the names of these non-residents, non-Ghanaian from the register. 2, we are still calling on the EC, the security services, and all necessary stakeholders to ensure that these 21 names that the MPP and the MP of not the Honorable Ambrosia are planning to still transfer their names onto the register. This must not happen. These names must not be found in the register. 3, we are still calling on all the necessary stakeholders, the chiefs, the security services, and all those people who matter, to ensure that we have a very clean elections. The assemblyman for Kokoligo electoral area and his likes, any other person who behaves like him thinking that they can attack us, must be cautioned. If not, if they come at us, we will double it.
This is a good call to the EC and the stakeholders to make sure that the voters register is well scrutinized to avoid any discrepancies, because this year's election, my brother, is not an easy election. So we don't want any situation whereby the register will be bloated, because we need free and fair elections. We want those who have won. We know that everybody will see that the person has won. We are not going to court. We are not going to do anything. We are winning the elections hands down. So NDC don't want any issues. We don't want any trouble. We are not troublemakers. We want to go out and vote for NDC, John Dramani Mahama, to win coming election to 7 December. So all this, anything that will bring chaos must be avoided by the EC. I think that they are planning to do a lot of things to rig the election, which we are not ready to do that.
We are not going to sit down for the MPP and EC to rig the election. And if they don't know, we are telling them that this election, it is by Ghanaians and then the MPP. So we are determined, whatever that they will do, we are also ready to meet them for boot for boot.
We've heard from the NDC in the Upper West region and then the Central region as well. But the Electoral Commission has also been responding to these allegations. In a Facebook post, they made a number of points. I want to show you some of those. They say the rationale for exhibiting the provisional voters register is to correct errors and omissions. It is only after all identified issues are corrected that the final register is printed for the elections. This has been the practice since 1992. Sort of a reminder to the NDC that they have been through this before since 1992, and they're just doing it again. The 2024 voters register, they continue to say, is robust and credible. Ignore assertions that the voters register is not fit for the 2024 elections. For more on this, we're joined by Dr. John Osai Kwapong, who is a political analyst and fellow at the Center for Democratic Development, CDD, Ghana. Doc, good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us here. I mean, you've seen the situation, the allegations the NDC has made, the response from the Electoral Commission. What readings are you making into all of this? Just confusion?
Good evening. I think it's very important that whatever these concerns are, that they are responded to and dealt with in a manner that is swift, but also an outcome that is satisfactory. But I think this is an ongoing and recurring issue, particularly between the main opposition party, the NDC, and the EC. It doesn't mean that they don't have certain valid or legitimate concerns. But there's been this fueling mistrust between the two. I thought that there was an improvement in that relationship when the NDC returned to IPAC to try and resolve some of these issues using the IPAC forum. But it appears that some of these issues would continue to, are continuing to persist, which is why, for me, at the end of the day, delivering a clean election, a free and fair election, not just the outcome, but all of the administrative processes that goes into ensuring a free and fair election, the onus is on the EC to continue to make sure that it is steps ahead in terms of ensuring that whatever processes, steps are being put in place to guarantee that free and fair process as well as outcome are dealt with. So for me, whatever issues keep coming up, for example, now when the provisional register and people are being asked to verify their registration and then indicate if there's been any issues with where they've been registered or not, whether their name is in the appropriate constituency or the appropriate polling station. Any of these issues that may come up, I think the EC has to respond to it very swiftly.
Absolutely. And the EC's response this time to the opposition party, they make mention of the fact that this is the practice since 1992, suggesting that the NDC may be getting ahead of itself. I mean, can we understand why the NDC may be oblivious of this at this point? I mean, they should know, shouldn't they?
They should, and I believe they do. But at the same time, I think, it still doesn't stop them from raising some of these legitimate concerns, but they should. But I think part of it is also this mistrust issue that I've been talking about. Dr. Bosman Asare from the EC was on the AM show this morning on Joy News. And one of the things he assured was that this exhibition exercise would allow them to hear these concerns, and then there's a process in place that would be used to rectify these concerns so that by the time everything is cleaned up, the final register before the December election would be clean and would be credible enough to guarantee that we'll have a free and fair election.
I see. We also know that the Electoral Commission has written to the NDC. They will be meeting on September 6th. I've confirmed that with Dr. Bosman Asare as well. But, I'm thinking about the fact that, like you have said, the mistrust is still there, perhaps even deeper than we thought. What should this meeting be focused on?
And I'm glad that there will be a meeting between these two. It actually helps to reduce some of that angst, help give the EC an opportunity to assure the NDC that they are not working against them or their interests, that they will treat every party fairly. I'm happy that the NDC is willing to have this meeting and share their concerns with the EC. Open, constant, regular dialogue between the EC, and the NDC and other political parties will be very helpful as we prepare. I think that would help, thaw some of that mistrust and at least begin to, allow both parties to see eye to eye on some of the key issues. So for me, two things that I hope the meeting would focus on. One is what are the concerns of the NDC, the documented concerns that they'll be bringing to the EC, and then the EC's response to those concerns and the specific steps that they plan to take to address those concerns. And then I hope that they will also have an opportunity to really talk about what the relationship should look like and should be between now and December when we have the election. Some way, somehow, that mistrust would have to be at least, even if not completely resolved, be reduced to an acceptable level where everyone can go into the election knowing that no one is working against the interest of any particular political party.
Very well, Doc. Woodiver here. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Dr. John Osai Kwapon is a political analyst and fellow at the Center for Democratic Development, CDD. Ghana. You're still live here on Ghana Tonight. I'm Kemeni Amano. This is our Friday edition, and we're talking about the electoral rule. We put up a poll on our WhatsApp channel. Speaking of that channel, now is a good time to join that channel so that you can have the opportunity to be part of polls like this. Your voices are important to us. So what was the question we asked? We asked, do you trust the EC to conduct a free, fair, and credible election in the 2024 polls? And the total number of votes there going over 700, over 800, if you like. 71 of you said absolutely. 790 said doubtful. And 27 answered indifferent. You know, I should have seen this poll before we let Dr. Kwapong go, so Dr. Kwapong could speak to this. But look at the numbers of you who responded to this poll saying you were doubtful the Electoral Commission could conduct a free, fair, credible election. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. So there you have it. There's a verdict of the people who have been speaking to us on our WhatsApp channel and answering to the question whether or not the Electoral Commission could deliver a free, fair, and credible 2024 elections. All the same, the Electoral Commission has been given the assurance that they will deliver a free, fair, and transparent process. But like Dr. Kwapong said, it's not only about the results, it's also about the process leading to the results. And in the future, we'll get the Electoral Commission to speak to some of these matters. Unfortunately, our calls today to the Electoral Commission did not yield any resource person from there to speak to us. And that's why in the course of this conversation, we haven't had, the speaking voice of the Electoral Commission, apart from that, Facebook post they put up earlier today. But I want to turn attention to another issue that matters to both you and me. Tonight, we are following conversations about monster ECG meters that are practically making consumer lives unbearable. Domestic electricity users say they are faced with persistent power cuts, overbilling, and unlawful meter disconnections. Now, some postpaid meter users also decry the late bill issuance and the surprise meter replacements. Now, back in 2022, ECG admitted that some prepaid meters, BOT, Alpha, and eCash, were not responding accurately to power purchased by customers due to date functionality drifts in these prepaid meters. Now, fast forward to 2024, this month, ECG said replacement meters are meant for efficient readings. Now, ECG could be looking down the barrel of a class action suit. Take a listen.
The nature of the overbilling we are experiencing appears to be an electronic problem with ECG itself, and not per se a mathematical error. That their system more or less is exaggerating the consumption rate of consumers. Some of the consumers are putting this to a faulty meter or a problematic device being used to measure or detect the amount of electricity they've consumed for a particular month. If we don't get appropriate remedy from the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission within reasonable time, we will either compel the ECG by a mandamus application or all other alternative remedies that we can get to ensure that the proper thing is being done. So far, we've had 10 signatures within WHO, 10 signatures within WHO. We've actually contacted, or a lot more people have made complaints, but the people are scared. The people are scared because they are scared of being targeted by these powerful politicians or government officials who may want to disconnect them and never connect their light. And that is the issue we are facing.
Now, that suit is looking to gather some 100 signatures. I have a feeling that they will be overwhelmed after the story airs here on Ghana Tonight. Now, the ECG has been apologizing since then and handing out more assurances, asking customers to be patient. General Manager of External Communications for ECG, Charles Ni Ayiku, spoke to us earlier on News 360.
Some have mentioned that not their credit disappearing, but it's the consumption or the reading of the meters are quite faster than they know.
And why does that happen? Do you give them the reasons why some of these things happen?
Okay, so let me just talk briefly about the new meters. And as you are aware, after 10 years, we are mandated to replace meters because after a certain period, they are not able to function as they are supposed to because they should I use the word expire at a point. So it affects the efficiency of these meters. So with the installation and replacement of these meters, customers have expressed concern that it runs very fast and all of that. But it is very important to understand that when meters are obsolete, it affects their function. And with the new meters, it's capturing the actual consumption of these customers.
Ni Ayiku there, his PR for ECG. Ending our coverage of that meter issue, but indeed not ending our coverage because before we go, I want to read some of your messages on social media. We'll start off with Facebook. Let's take a look at some of the messages that have come in so far. We know many of you have been complaining. Well, not Facebook, but X. This is not even a joke, says Collins. I stay alone and use solar energy. I only use ECG line when I want to pump water into polytanks. The meter went off and I topped up, yet it was still off. I called ECG after 24 hours. They told me I owe them 800 cedis. Man. Well, be funny, but got me giggling. These ECG guys brought a bill worth of 73,000 for my boss at his cement shop. A new meter, which I can't read that, Kobe. I can't read that, but we get the point. 73,000 worth of bill was brought to you. Hooker says 2 postpaid meters on a compound. One was overbilled 7K. The other had an outstanding bill of 2,000 cedis. Both were disconnected, and the one that had the outstanding bill was settled. Now, ECG says they won't reconnect him because the other... Well, the PRC is going to have a ton of complaints on it, and our checks already show that a lot of consumers and customers are already reaching out to the PURC. But like I told you earlier, the ECG is apologizing. They're saying they're resolving the matter. So if you have any issue, go to the regulator and perhaps your issue will be dealt with the way you want. But as we do every Friday night here, we give you a glimpse of what the news weekend will look like. On Saturday, you have key points at 7 a.m. here on TV3 with Alfred Okanse. But at 2 p.m. on Sunday, you join me for Hot Issues, and I want to give you a snippet of that right now. My conversation with former Finance Minister Seth Tekpe. Listen, that conversation is riveting. We talked about all things economy, the plans the NDC has. We also looked at some trending issues like whether or not our exchange rate will get any better anytime soon, what the plans of the NDC are, and then also, this whole situation around the cocoa syndicated loan and why we may or may not be getting the money. Take a listen. Really, to ensure that the exchange rate does not go out of the roof than it already is.
Don't use the bank to finance the deficit. Raise your own revenue to finance the deficit. It's unprecedented in our history for the central bank, to deplete their reserves and the nation's reserves, right? Because the fiscal, the government cannot raise revenue.
Right now, they tell us there is recovery. They say we have 3.1.
But the harm has been done already. The harm has been done already when they shouldn't. It's something that shouldn't have happened.
Right. So it means that if or when the NDC comes into office, by that time we will probably have improved reserves. By the time you're coming into office. So what else would you be doing to
improve reserves when you can't even get, you are producing 1/3 of the cocoa that you used to export, and when.
Listen, I'm out of time. I can't show you anymore. But look at me when I tell you that you haven't seen Seth Tekpe excited about any conversation. He's a soft-spoken man, but I brought it out of him. You want to stay tuned to us here on TV3. 2 p.m. on Sunday, we'll bring you that conversation. Have a good night, pleasant weekend. I'm Kemeni Amano. Bye-bye.